Grand Reserve report.
Okay,
So talk about the performance
Yes.
Grand and Reserve. Yes.
So the Grand and Reserve classes, AQHA has apparently always done this, but when the 4.0 system came in, the results team now has to manually split out if a person who is grand champion in the halter came from the performance halter class, they go into a performance Grand and Reserve, not just a Grand and Reserve class. So there is actual class codes, and I don't think they did a good job of explaining this to secretaries, but they're expecting secretaries to have the performance Grand and Reserve classes set up in their show to turn in with their results, as well as Grand and Reserve classes. So if your Grand horse came out of the aged mares and your Reserve horse came out of the performance class, you would have a Reserve performance halter for that age and division. That's well, and they started sending out the stickers, but they didn't explain really what that was or how to set it up. So we decided that we could help a lot with that with Funware, where how it used to say, have you placed all these classes for your Grand and Reserve classes? Your performance Grands and Reserves are built into the classes. And when you go into that, it only is taking the information from the performance classes, not the age class 2-year-olds. It only comes from the performance class. In the system preferences now, this little button automatically add Grand and Reserve entries. So it will automatically put them in the correct place now. But you have to have the performance Grands and Reserves built into your system. So when you place the performance halter class, those people automatically get added to the performance Grand and Reserve, just as the other classes are added to the Grand and Reserve class. I know all of this is new, but another twist on that is you can tie your 2 Grand classes together. Your performance Grand mares, your amateur performance Grand Champion mares, and your Grand Champion amateur mares. Tie those 2 classes together, so then when you go to the results, you don't have to look back through all of the information and figure out, which one's which. You just put in your Grand and your Reserve, and it will automatically put it to either the performance or
held with, exactly.
Correct. But that, like I said, apparently AQHA forever has split them out. And I had no idea they even did that. And when 4.0 started, their program internally does not automatically take that information out. So then they started sending out the stickers to all the secretaries for the performance classes with, no explanation of what that was. And I was like, well, that's weird. We don't need that.
We don't do that.
Right.
And I think what they said was, we have no idea. Don't worry about it.
Correct.
And that because the person you were talking to, unfortunately. So we had amongst ourselves and Christian Jante, you guys have probably, some of you know him or have talked to them. He also does tech support with us, and our one of our other programmers, Jarrell. We all had a thing in December, and we got Melinda on the phone actually, and we're like, okay, what can we do to help you? And that was a big thing that she talked about, the no scratches in the RJ file. Back when they created the RJ file, they have a new column that says scratched. And so I contacted them as soon as I got the file, and I said, hey, you've got this new file. We've never put scratches in that old file ever before. We always eliminated them, but now you've got this column. Do you want us to put scratches in there? And Melinda's like, sure, there's a field for it. We'll probably use it someday. And then unfortunately it wasn't programmed, kind of thing. So she was unaware of that. And so so the handful of things that we've just done in the last few months that we, included in this update came out of that probably half a day conversation with Melinda on what are the stop gaps? What are the pieces of this RJ file that are kicking error messages, weird ones like, the staging area and the other one that you were getting, too.
XJP,
so
something.
we were trying to, we obviously can't do everything, and they can't do everything. So hopefully between all of us, when I say all of us, it's like you guys as a group, Funware as a group, AQHA as a group, if we can all stay in communication and understand where pain points are for everybody, then hopefully we can eventually get to a really good place where you're just uploading your files and everything works hunky-dory, and then the results get uploaded, and then their show results get immediately connected to the right information.
Right.
So,
depending on the size of your show, like at Denver, we only built the performance grand and reserve for the classes. Like we didn't have any stallions. We didn't have any open mares, you know. So we only built the performance grands for classes we actually had entered. Totally up to you, but it's easy when you're setting up your show, you set up your grands and reserves. It's easy just to add the performance grands and reserves as well. And I know that when I talk to Melinda, there's a lot of secretaries who don't even set up the grand and reserve in their setup still to this day. And they'll just send results and figure, well, they'll figure it out. Well, they're going to start sending that back to the secretaries and say, you did not build grand and reserve. You need to build that into your system. And they're going to make the secretaries do all of that. So, you know, cut your losses, just do it all at the beginning and just set up, once you set up your grands and reserves, and you don't, like in the schedules, we usually build a space holder, give it a class number, whatever you do. The performance grands and reserves, I always just put it 999, 998, you know, whatever, and build them at the end of my show. So do whatever you need to, but you don't have to put them in your class schedule. And that would be something when you build those, the HST visible. I never make the grands or reserves visible for the horse show tracker or the online entry. I mean, they don't need to enter anything. But
that's actually another thing I don't know that I automatically did. I know the all-around classes, there's a new field in the classes area that allows online entry or not. Like it's
in the class setup.
In the class setup, yeah.
Of any class.
Real quick there.
Any class?
Well, right there, yes. Sure. So it has that box there under the pay social security number required, allow online entry. And so everything by default has that listed. I should make that change that all the grand reserves, anything that is grand reserve.
You don't need to have
we don't want
online
them to enter
entries.
them. We added this actually because the stock horse, the all-around classes, the Stock Horse Association, a lot of people are adding, if you're running versatility, you're adding the all-around class to your show as well. And they were entering the all-around class thinking, I don't have to enter the 4 or the 6 of the ones that I need to. I'm just going to enter the all-around class. That's not really exactly how it works. And we didn't realize it. You know, we didn't realize that that was the message that we were putting out there until it was out there.
Does anybody have questions about the grand and reserve things?
Okay.
What's the...
Okay.
Hold on.
Do you know what the all-around? Oh, they have
No.
still.
The grand and reserve classes, 1,
10,
7,
10, 10, 10, 10 with a lot of zeros at the end.
Try again.
10, 10, 0, 0. Is that right? Is that too many zeros?
Yay.
There you go.
On these grand and reserve classes, this one, the little box is checked where it says is grand and reserve. And the performance grand champion classes also have that, and it looks for just the information from which class it comes from the performance. This tells you which the grand class is for the performance halter mares. It tells you where the grand and where the reserve is going. So it's automatically pushing it because it's coming from the performance class to the performance grand and reserve classes. So all of that is pre-built into the system. You just have to build the actual class into your setup.
Yeah, into your show list.
So,
show build list.
does that all make sense?
Yes.
Okay, what did you want about fees?
Financials, we want to talk about financials?
Sure. What is that?
Anybody have any specific, so one of the things, Ashley called us, Banana Man called us the other night actually when we were all watching a weird movie. It was really weird, sorry. All day fees.
How many of you do all day fees, all inclusive fees?
So do you have any built in any of the shows that you have there?
Probably
so
not.
Ashley had unintentionally included all the cattle charges into her all day fee. And was trying to understand why they zeroed out all the cattle fees, and the first person that she checked out didn't pay for any cattle fees.
Oh, was that first person?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Then you realize something's wrong.
Right.
So I mean, I think these are, I don't have any built, but we can just build one. So my all-day fee is $250, and she had a bunch of cattle fees, so she just had, I may be incorrectly, but I think she just checked all of the boxes to include all the fee types. So well, that's not how they wanted to do theirs. They still have to pay the cattle fees besides that. So you would want to pick whatever your fee is instead of picking like the cow, horse, and the cutting and all of those, which I don't have any. But the class fees, any of the entry fees, whatever you have named make sure you pick whichever ones you want to include, and you can include them or exclude them as needed to build your all-day fee correctly. Questions about that? Do you ever have issues setting up your all-day fees or your all-inclusive fees or anything?
Seems like all the time, really. I mean, there's always something I figure it out, but I'm like always, it's almost it all of a sudden works by default, and I don't really know what I did. A lot of times that's what my issue is. It's like, what did I just do?
Well, most times the office fee is not in the all-day fee, the drug fees. You want to just include the entry fees or class fees, whatever you have called them for your show. You want to include those. So then when a person enters 5 classes, they've now gone over the threshold of 4 classes, whatever your all-day fee is. They've gone over the threshold of how much money, so then it'll zero out all of the charges. So if your all-day fee is $100 and your classes are $25 a piece, 25, 50, 75, 100, the 5th one, then they zero out all of the fees.
So we have it set up so we have it counts the fees for the class. We normally include the stall, the office fee, and the classes. But I keep the office fee and the stall in there as a price, say, and then the classes will total what our all-day fee is, including that.
So your all-day fee is $500, your stalls are $100, and your office is $25. So instead of $500 for just your classes, it would be $500 minus the $100 minus the $25.
Just to have
so then your all-day fee would be $375, would be the threshold of when they get too many classes.
Exactly. That's. I mean, I do it correctly. I think I'm doing extra at times.
Maybe you're including too many of the fees, or the other thing that I've seen people do, and so because we don't have an all-inclusive thing and we don't have it across the entire event, that kind of thing. Obviously, we've seen a lot of creative ways of people doing it. Kind of like what you're saying is the stall charge gets a once per circuit. So that that's another thing, is to make sure that you're doing it once per circuit, not every show. So if you got 2 split combines, you don't want to charge them twice. You want to charge them. So you want to set up your horse fee in both master shows, but only once per circuit. Same with your office charge, or do they get 2 office charges at that point?
No, just the one. They get 1 stall, 1 office, and then the classes.
And you want to make sure that you're including them into both master shows, or however many master shows you have in your circuit, because if they don't, say your show starts Thursday and goes to Monday, but this particular person doesn't come until Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want them to not get charged that stall or that office fee because they are only entering split combine 2. Right. So you got to make sure that you're including those fees in all of your master shows. And if you only want to charge it once over that circuit, you just click the once per circuit fee itself, or once per circuit option.
And like what I'm finding, and maybe, is that say they're only there for half the show. Mm-hmm. So it's only giving them, I have 2 all-day fees set up, 1 for each circuit. Correct. Am I doing that correctly?
That would be correct.
So it's kind of,
if it's a whole show fee versus just if it's a $250 per show, $500 total for the weekend if it's 2 shows.
Ours is like $500 for the whole time.
Right.
So if they
you would set it up as 250 for show 1 and 250 for
Okay,
show
so I am
2.
doing that,
See,
correct.
that always screws
No.
us up, and that was going to be one of my questions.
It does,
Because when you
Well,
go
and
to
there's-
check somebody out, if one half of the show is heavier than the other on entry,
yes.
Correct.
and I don't understand why that can't be pulled together, because that is a huge, huge issue with our shows, especially with a 5-judge show. You know, when you can split
Do you
that,
understand
that
the problem?
fee equally,
Okay.
but we have more errors in the.
Well, we don't, actually, I wouldn't agree that you should split it equally. You should split it
By judge.
3 and 2,
Right.
not, so it wouldn't,
No,
right,
no,
okay.
I mean equally by judge.
Oh, okay.
If you prorate it per judge,
Mhm.
okay, so you're doing it, but it still is a huge problem when people are checking out.
Right.
Because ultimately you under or overcharge somebody because of whichever end of the horse show they showed heavier on. And is that something that can be fixed?
Well, so we've had this conversation lots of times, and is that something that we can program for? Sure, we can do anything you want for time and money. So the question is always how many people are having the same issue, and for the $175 that an organization is paying, can we afford to do that since 3 people might have that issue and the other 80% are figuring out different ways of doing it? That's part of the reason as to why we've been trying, and sometimes we've been successful, not so much, in getting more show secretaries to talk to each other, in kind of explaining how they might get the same thing accomplished in a way that works, and doesn't end up with kind of a mess that you're talking about.
I
a
can
little mess a lot
understand
of
why
times
when
the
the
girls don't
software
catch it.
can look at the whole thing as a circuit. The software says, okay, well, we've got you in all of these classes, and we can give you all of these fees for all 5 of your judges. Why it can't just go, okay, click, you've hit this magic number, and now these are all going to be zeroed out, and hand you the one fee. It just seemed like as long as it was already all tied together, it wouldn't be.
Sure. I mean, I'll tell you that it's not anywhere near as simplistic as you're indicating there.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. And the original design of the software was back when it was split combines didn't even exist, and you could do double judge shows. So there was like a one show and another show that were together. Then it's evolved, kind of what Ray was saying earlier. It's evolved obviously, and we're trying to evolve the software as much as possible. When we took over the creation of this, the queries are all based on the master show, and the only way that it ties those together, and it's not even that it's running queries against those things, it's literally just putting them all in a list, right? And it's easy to put things in a list, it's less easy to program against them, against querying against all those things. It's something that's been on our list for a while, and it will continue to be on our list until we can get things done. The big problem, again, goes back to we have 3 programmers, and they all have to get paid, and we have to kind of figure out what is gathering us extra, to get those things taken care of.
So I guess my question
It's just
is,
a lot of manual.
right, I was going to say, by going in and doing it manually, I'm doing it the easiest way I can.
For the all-inclusive things, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Back,
what
I mean,
just
and that's the
didn't know
other
if it
thing
was
too, is
me
back
or-
when all of these things first started being built. Ironically, I never heard that anybody was doing these all-inclusive fees until, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. People would figure out ways, kind of doing this, and then a couple years into doing it, we started hearing more, like Chris and I have had this conversation a couple times, but you guys had been doing it for years before I even realized
we were one
that
of the
people,
first ones that did it.
yeah,
And do you still do all?
Well, see, we
All
started
days
out
are
with
all
the
inclusive?
all-inclusive, which included the stall and all that, but as fees and things changed, we're now just strictly it's just your entry fees. You're still paying all the other stuff.
okay,
You're still prepaying your stall, you're still paying the direct fees, but we're just doing a one flat rate for the entry fees.
So back to the all-day fee that
Right.
used to,
yeah.
when I'm sure this was built on.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is that AQHA used to, I mean, I remember having a conversation with the original developer about why it was the way it was, and it was because AQHA actually mandated, like, your all-day fee couldn't be a certain amount, and it only could include X, Y, and Z. And so when he built all that, that was where it got, that was where it came from. And then for years, we just, went along the same path because it worked, and people figured out creative ways of kind of figuring it out. And then when you get the weird kind of shows, like you said, with the 3 and the 2, that makes it more cumbersome. For sure to do it, and it is still on our list. I will absolutely tell you that. I just know it hasn't been done yet.
I just wondered if any progress.
Keep asking.
Because that's one of the bigger error areas that we have. If somebody's going to screw up somebody's bill, that's typically what it's from.
I
Okay.
normally try to figure out the the magic number of how many classes
Right.
that equals that, and tell the girls that, okay, if it looks like
They've
add 'em
gone
up,
over 6 classes.
then, and I said, that's total, it's not just per circuit,
Sure.
it's total classes. So if you only show one, but you show 10 in the second part of the show, it's gonna work for you, you know. And that's-
Right.
And it kind of seems like it's region dependent too, because like California, the West Coast, like they do very, very, very few, if any, all day, all inclusive type fees.
Yeah.
That's just not, and it seems like more Midwest, East, like has a few more of those, but like we on the West, like we don't ever do any of those. So it's kind of region specific too as to who that affects.
Yeah, no, that makes, I would agree with you. I talk to users on different areas, and the majority of the ones that we have these conversations with are
Midwest, kind of.
Midwest. More actually, yeah, Michigan probably over, and north. So
Right.
like the northern section of the country
Yes.
as opposed to southern and, yeah. So Wayne, you're doing shows for where?
Delaware.
Delaware. Are they doing, do they do all day fees, all inclusive fees? Yeah, yeah. We've talked to a lot of people who start out that way, kind of what you were saying there too, and then it almost becomes cost prohibitive because you're giving away all this stuff. You end up with classes that are outrageously large when they didn't have to be because people are just going into them because they're free, and then you're paying your judges overtime because they have to stay longer because the classes have gotten bigger. I mean, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So we've been seeing less and less, or go in the opposite direction. We've been seeing more people drop off the all-day fee and going to either, not even an
Individual
all-weekend fee,
classes.
but just like just pay for your classes and that's it, kind of thing.
We've had
They're
to-
reducing class fees, but they're making everybody pay for them straight across.
We've just had to be pretty creative, because in order to show in Michigan, you gotta wanna get to Michigan.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you really do.
Right.
We're a peninsula, what a foreign country on one side and a big old lake on, all the way around it. So, to get anybody from out of state up there, we've had to be creative.
Sure.
Right.
Which makes sense. Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. Does anybody else have other pain points around the financial stuff?
Our all-day fee hurt us last year because we had the drug fee in it, and then the drug fee went up, and we never went up. So we got a little bite in the butt for that one, but that just took away X amount of dollars, so we just pulled that out this year.
Sure.
That's AQHA, that goes directly to them. This is us.
That's a good way of thinking
Yeah.
about it, too.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Are people seeing a situation where they're doing one fee across a set of concurrent classes? That's another feature we're looking at.
Oh, right. That in
Fly for free or
NRHA and cattle classes that are running concurrently, NRHA, for instance, has a judge fee. And the new rule that they put in play a year or so ago is that you can run your classes concurrently, and people can be in more than one of those classes, but you only have to pay one judge fee, and you have to pay the highest of them. So that's one thing too. But you only have to pay one, and so of course the class fees are, per class. And then the cattle charges, like it's on circuit, if you're in the AQHA class plus the NRCHA class plus whatever other approving association they had there, maybe a local one or something, Arizona one, they only make you pay the cattle charge once because you're,
Only using the cow
you're
once.
only using cattle one time. But so we're looking at, and this would be including as we're starting to build out more of these kinds of things, we're looking to be more either across the circuit and across concurrent classes a little more dramatically. So we are looking at those things, and the fee types in general, fee structures. Anybody do taxes in their area? Anybody need to deal with that? Okay, that's great, because that was
no.
what Renee Burks' issue was the other day, was the tax issue. So
Yeah, I
was
don't know
gonna
how to do any
go
of those.
over to explaining how
I
to
don't
use it,
do-
but if nobody needs it, then that would be a waste of all of our time. We'll have to do our own little video on taxes
Right.
that we have to do there. You want to pull up the utilities menu, and let's go kind of like what we did with the system preferences. Let's go through the utilities just kind of briefly, because we have added a couple of new ones, and let's just like
Sure.
touch base over them. So maintain associations. This is where if you're building your own, especially, we obviously come loaded with the ones that are that we work with nationally. So I don't know
I
if
might
this,
have a lot of new ones in mind.
you do have a lot of new ones in there. One of the
like
things that we've been seeing
gonna
more and
skip
more
past
and that we're actually utilizing on the tablets, and a lot of the associations are allowing, although I will tell you that many judges don't think should be allowed, is the whole off pattern thing. So tap into AQHA just real quick, because that's the one I know for sure, and go down to the scoring statuses. So you'll notice that actually we added a couple of more because AQHA now wants us to go. We used to just say off pattern once, then you. So the way it works, is everybody familiar with how off pattern works as far as the judging part goes? So what the judges are doing is if you go off pattern one time, they could still get a 70 along with everybody else, but their 70 goes to the bottom of all the non-off pattern ones. If you go off pattern twice, then that 70 goes to the bottom of all of the off pattern ones. If you go off pattern 3 times, but you still did amazingly well and have a 70, you're dropped, further down kind of list, down the list kind of thing. So they're sorted initially by how many off patterns you did, and then by score, basically, is how they're supposed to be doing that on their ladder sheet, right? What we built into the system, onto the tablets, allow you to do this, and Porsche for Windows, you can even manually key this in if you're doing it yourself, is the off pattern 1, 2, and 3 more than 3. Well, AQHA at Versatility and I don't know, somewhere else has decided that they want to go deeper.
Well, yes, if you've gone off pattern 5 times, does it really matter?
I know, that Ray's like, are they sure? And I'm like, yeah, don't ask me. This is what, this is where they're coming from. But anyway, so just to kind of explain what those mean, and we'll be adjusting for those. So those scores are based on it. So you can see next to the placing sequence, there's like a 1, 2, 3, and then a 4, 5, 6. They're basically, that's how they're sorted, right? So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and then all the scores kind of in those groupings kind of thing. And again, this only pertains to if you're putting physical scores in, and you might need to add the off pattern to it, because in a ranked class, if they're just giving you the rankings, they've already made that decision as to where that horse falls, whether it's, up here we had, I don't know, Scott actually texted me and said, Casey Devitt says you didn't use any off pattern at Sun Circuit. I'm like, I'm literally looking at the database right now, and there's a class of like 12, and I'm pretty sure that 1, maybe 2 horses in that trail pattern didn't go off pattern. So again, 90% of the time, if you're just going to stick with rankings, the judge is already going to make that decision. But just to show you how it works, especially if you're going to get into tablets and start using the scoring part of it, the judges have the ability to do this, and the system does rank them appropriately, so then they can fill their card out appropriately as well. Divisions and relationships, and I think these are all the same kinds of things that we've had before. So.
No changes to those.
No. Scoring statuses was the one thing. We did the association disk file creation. Everybody's got one. Ponies have got one. AQHA has got one. We kind of went through that one. Duplicating classes. This is where this is the function that I'm sure probably many of you have used already. You built a show. You got your classes in for the first day, and now you want to build them in for the second slate. I don't know if anybody uses the copy all the entries over from one to another. You guys do? Yeah. So you do too, Heidi?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, so you can either copy the entries or not copy the entries. I had somebody call me and she was freaking out. She's like, there's entries already in here. And I go, well, did you click the button? Well, sure. Why wouldn't I click that button? I'm like, well, you told it to copy all the entries. I'm sorry. She's like, what do I do now? And I'm like, now you got to delete the show and start again. So.
And good luck.
She was fine. Combining classes, we talked a little bit about that. The one thing I think, does everybody successfully use this function? Because the call that we do get on combining classes is they're putting the shovel number in as opposed to. We did have did we write that? We have to check that one glitch that if you got to put the senior class first or the junior class first.
It changed.
I was going to say we had to do it one way one time and the other way.
So when we went to combine the classes, we had created a open class, and then where it says, put in your class codes with a comma between them. I started with the junior class code, comma, senior class code, went to combine them, and it said the junior class isn't in your show. Well, I know it's in the show because there's people in it. So then I don't know why, but I put in the senior class, comma, junior class, combined them all just fine. I was like, well, that was weird.
She just told me that a couple days ago, so we haven't really delved into the code.
Yeah, so if you get that error, just try flip-flopping whichever way you did it, because on the next combined class, I was like, well, I know how to do this. I put in the senior class, I put in the junior class, and it says the senior class is not in your show. And I was like, I put in the junior class, then the senior, and it said, oh, they're all combined.
Maybe it's just the first time you go in there, Heidi. It's going to tell you that.
I have no idea, but I was like, oh, well, that's new. Something, but generally, and as long as we figured out how to, correctly do that, it combines all the classes and moves them all.
And moves your fees and everything too. So the one thing I think that can also be done, and I don't know how many of you guys are doing this already, is if you have select and amateur classes and you don't have enough, you can actually combine, you can actually put the amateur, you can put the select classes into the amateur class as well. It depends. I mean, it depends on how many entries. If you've only got 1 or 2 entries in your select class, it's not that big a deal to delete and add them. But if you've got, the higher number in the select class, and because they all have to go into the amateur class.
So you would, because that's the one I'm back and forth combining.
Yeah, so you can do the classes to combine. You would put the select class in there, and then the classes to move entries to, you would put the right, and then you would put the 23800.
Now, but it renumbers it, correct? Or is that just
it shouldn't. I'm trying to think. Actually, if you only put the select class in there and leave off the classes to combine, then I think it will just move those horses into the other class without changing anything.
Always renumbers it, and then I'm like, where'd that go?
Well, so the whole idea on the combining classes in the first place is that, this sometimes confuses people, is because it does delete the physical classes from your show bill list. Right. Because there is a difference when you send information to any association. There is a difference between a class that was never held, which is what happens here, versus a class that has no entries. And they want to know the classes that have no entries, but they don't want classes that are not held. So that's why we physically remove those from the list.
Right.
And so it probably removed the amateur class, and then you have to, then it's ironically, the entries are probably in the back end. You can just add it back in. You're probably good to go. But I think if you just put the select class in.
It just kept it with class. It just put them into amateur.
Very good, Heidi. Thank you.
It's a good thing this isn't my live
When
thing.
you're
Right now I don't know who's in.
trying to combine like the youth, if you have to build all age classes.
Correct. Yes.
To be able to move it.
Yep, you have to start with you have to add the new class to your show. And I have a handful of people, which in a way I guess makes a little bit of sense, is they put the all age classes at the end of the show anyway.
I do.
You do that too? Yeah. And then if they combine them, then it's already done, and all they have to do is the combined classes, and then at the end of the show, if there's any all age classes left that they didn't combine, they just remove them. So that's an option too.
Well, and like I was talking with Ann at the last show, I never thought of this, but I always have them just added to 999 whatever class, and then she'll go back in and change that class number to the 14 to 18 class that was on the show bill, so then it'll show up correctly. It'll in that space, because lots of times producers don't know where to look for the information, and they'll look where it was supposed to be on the show bill and say, well, you didn't have a class. Well, yes, it's at the end of the thing.
Oh, you're saying if you're printing like the show summary report, they're not seeing it because they're looking for it in one place.
So that is one thing you can do as well, is once you get your combined class, then you can go back and just change that class number to fit in your show bill wherever it was supposed to go. Something I never thought of, but
Well, you could change
you had to think of it.
Well, you don't even have to do the 999. You can.
You
have to put it into your show bill first, unless it's the amateur class that's already in there. In the case of a all age class, you have to put it into your show bill first.
But I mean, I would just have it under the all age.
Correct. So I have class 200 is my 13 and under class. Yeah. Class 201 is my 14 to 18. I have to add the all age. I can't add the all age as class 201 because there already is a class with that number currently. So I'd have to add it as 999. Okay, so combine the classes into that youth, and then go back into 999 and change it to 201. So then it shows up correctly in the, depending on your producers or your management, whatever, sometimes you need to make it as easy as possible for them to find all of the things.
You don't want those weird questions later, which is what prompted Ann to do that in the first place. Yes.
Right. Looking at it. No, I don't see it. Okay. Do you know how to find?
So yes. So that's the combining function.
So what happens when you do your upload to AQ then, when that class code wasn't in there as an all age?
Correct.
Then are you given the opportunity to?
Well, that's where you have to contact AQHA, because I had that conversation with them too. I'm like, well, why don't you guys just
build
always
in the
build it
open.
in the all age class in case that happens. I guess that's more cumbersome.
Again, it's
on their side.
it's a manual thing,
Yeah.
and the people who are entering the information you send in on your approval have not necessarily ever been to a horse show and don't understand that that's
I put it
a
on my
combined.
approval as well.
You do.
Yep.
Well, then
I don't know
then
if
yours
I-
is already there. No, that's
Yeah.
fine. Then yours is already there. I didn't think about that.
You add it right on.
Yep.
Yeah, I never would have thought of that either.
Because you don't pay per class, right? It's how many entries you had last year.
Right.
But
So-
then aren't they looking for results for that class?
They will be.
Probably. That's,
And right, wrong, or otherwise, what I've always done is when I know that I have combined something, even if it's on a Saturday or Sunday, I just do an email right then to them that
just
says,
say, I combine.
hey, can you please, for this show number, for these 3 show numbers, can you please add these classes? We've combined them. So then by the time the results get there, that should already be done by the approval side of things. So then the results team doesn't have to go, well, this class isn't in there. So any of the changes. Jenny Hart and Carol Luke. I think it's,
You know, that last.
They are-
it might be approval at AQHA. I'm
What
sorry,
I was
don't
just
remember
going to say
there.
is that last Q letter that just came had the 4 email addresses at the bottom of who to send for what. And as a matter of fact, they specifically said don't send them to specific people's names because they may or may not be tracking them. And certainly,
And they may have, staff turnover, and that
Yes,
person is
exactly.
no longer there anymore.
Yeah. You mean I can't still email hlane@aqha.org?
You can, and it gets forwarded to the World Show email.
Oh, does it?
It
Oh,
does.
there you go. I'll start sending notes to Aubrey that way then.
What they tell you when you call them, because they're like, oh, we don't ever look at that email, so send it to
Well,
us
and they,
personally.
over the last, I would say 4 or 5 months, have had meeting after meeting of this is where you go, stop using this. And, they've kind of changed the policies in there of how they look at that information. But yeah,
To the show approval email, we don't ever look at that.
Oh gosh.
yeah, they got in trouble for that a lot. So that's,
So that's
the
no
only
longer the
place they
case?
can look at now.
That's no longer the case.
You need the show approval form to work. Yeah, it doesn't work when you use that.
Well, in that last Q ribbon, I don't know how many of you, I didn't notice, we were sitting looking at emails, but Linda just sent out a thing 2 days ago, yesterday, and that had quite a bit of good information in there and, changes that they have and things. I think she might have even touched on the performance halter thing.
I think she might have too. Yeah.
Because there was,
on my phone, it's too small.
Yeah. You wait till you get back
Don't
home, Marge.
struggle.
Yeah. You wait till you get back home. Yeah, understood. Okay, so if we go back to the list of utilities, so generating back numbers has always, I don't know if any of you guys use it, if you have a group of back numbers that you're trying to get auto assigned. The only people that use it are if they're trying to auto assign a back number. And actually that comes into play. You don't have to do it from here. We'll show you the horse show tracker maintenance screen, but that comes into play when you're taking online entries. We need to assign it a back number when we import it. And we'll talk more specifically about a couple
Options.
of tips and stuff when we get to that point. But that's what the generate back numbers function does, is it creates basically a range of back numbers that if you leave the back number blank when you're doing entries and just key the horse in, when you go to click OK, it'll pull a random one, or sequentially or random. There's a way to do that, and it'll just assign a back number. Like here at Congress, they don't assign back numbers as 1001, 1002, 1003 because they don't want to have to deal with, I wanted this number, I wanted that number, and you gave me this number kind of thing. So they literally have from 1000 to 9999, and the system, similar to what this one would do, is they just key in they put the horse's name in there, and it randomly pulls a number, and that's that horse's
that's what
number.
you get.
Exactly.
Is there things on this list that you guys have questions about, or
That's probably
we'll go
a good
through some of the new additions of things, but do you have questions? Is there things that we need to explain more in the utilities? Is there things you use a lot or don't use that you don't know how to use them?
Some of it could just briefly, it might be like, oh,
Go to J. So one of the things that we changed here, I'm going to pull just a class up. One of the things that we just recently changed here, actually, because you can pull up, you can have a class with quite a lot of entries in it that you don't want to do a draw with exhibitor too close. And while yes, you have that option in building the draw, there's still potentially that you might want to spread them out a little further. Maybe there's a trainer that you know needs to be here, there, everywhere. Heidi, if you click on the name of the exhibitor, it will go ahead and cancel that. If you click on the column header, it will sort by exhibitor. So when you've done the draw, and then you've got your draw numbers on the left-hand side, 1 through whatever, kind of thing, and that's what it would sort by when you first went in here. You can also sort it then by the exhibitor and also by the horse, actually, so that you can ensure that that exhibitor is far enough apart without necessarily, if you have a class that's, 50, 70, 100 in there, to verify that you really have this, this person or
we have that with our trail.
Yeah.
Junior and senior a lot.
So after you do your draw, if you come into the manual order here and then just click the column, then you can just kind of verify you're far enough apart here, and you can adjust them if you need to.
I'm going to pick an open class because that's.
Does that
Just
only
kidding.
work with the tracker, or can you do that?
No, this is
Just
Horse River
as-
Windows. This is straight Horse River Windows. It has nothing to do with the tracker.
So like this one, Michael Hoyt's in there a couple times, so I could, once I do the draw for this class, I would just make sure that he's not like draw 2 and 3 or
Or if somebody
or if I-
specifically asked to be at the end.
correct.
put
You
them-
can just
okay.
manually change them to
Exactly.
wherever.
That was an option.
Yep. Now the one thing here is that you can give the draw of somebody. It doesn't. So if he wants to be at the end, if you've got a draw of 1 through 15 and he's 2 and you want him to be 15, if you change him to 15, it's not going to change 15 to 2. So you need to change 15, and then you also need to change 15 to 2. So then you'll have 2 15s at that point if you just change him to 15.
Let's just draw that class so you can see what it does.
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna
there's
change
always
that
the
to-
option to give it, how many you want to have it go in between. But if you can't get it to draw because there's too many too close or something, and then you still want to, maneuver them around, this gives you the ability to do so.
See, now when I look at them, Michael is 3 and 6, and I don't think that's enough room for him. I want to move this one down to draw 9. I change his draw to draw 9. And now if I put them back in draw order, I have 2 of them at draw 9. So then I would have to change this one back to draw 6, wherever I took him out of. Does that make sense?
Yep. Very helpful.
No, don't push it to tracker because they're going to wonder why they've been placed and all of that.
Yeah. What about K2? Does everybody use this function to swap people around?
I
Swap
use this a
back
ton.
number? Yeah, I think. Yeah, okay.
For
So-
either responsible party, you can change a horse if they have a substitution. They want to keep all the same classes, but Bobo got hurt and they want to have, Hyper Monkey come in instead, then change them all.
Hyper monkey.
Might be my horse. The back number function, I use this a lot too, and we'll go into this a little more later, but when we do pre-entries or entries online, I always assign 5,000 numbers. I don't have 5,000 numbers in my back number. So then I know who's checked into the show and who hasn't. So if you see the gate person and they have a draw and there's a 5,012 back number, they know that that's a scratch. That person hasn't picked up their back number yet. So then I use this function to change. Once they get there, I go from, oh, good, you're here. I change their back number from 5,000 to whatever the next one in the pile is. So that way I know who's checked in and who isn't checked in, basically. So just a different way of doing things, but I use that function a lot.
What else is on there? The year-end database clear. So back, for those of you guys, and there's at least half of you in the room now that use the DOS program, you literally could never move from one year to the next without clearing last year's data. Like the system never let you put in the same show ID, and of course AQHA. I don't know, do you guys use the same show IDs year to year? Or did they just start a new sequence? Okay, so APHA and AQHA, maybe not APHA. Anyway, maybe it's just AQHA. They use the same freaking show ID every year. And so back in the old system, back when the software was first developed, you could only keep 1 year's worth of data in at a time, because when you went to try to use that show ID again, it would say it already exists. And of course, that was great, but that was last year. So it used to literally force you to clear the year at the beginning. And then when they converted over from the DOS program to the Windows program, that's another thing. I don't know if anybody's aware that I took a hiatus of about 2 years in between the DOS, and it turns out it was in between the DOS program and the Windows program. So they developed the Windows program in that 2 years that I was not doing this anymore. When my third child was born, when was he born? 1998. Childcare for 3 kids was tough, and so I quit basically working with Tony and his group. And in that interim period of time is when they converted from the DOS program to the Windows program. When my son was almost 2, Tony called me and said, I don't have time or the inclination to do this anymore. Do you want this back? You know, like, do you want to do this? And that's when I started, in 2000 is when I started doing this myself. Anyway, the big thing that they did was allow you to put in multiple years so that, you know, so now you got the show year plus the show ID is the key so that you can have multiple years. However, you should not have 10 or 20 or 15 years in here because that becomes counterproductive to the speed of your database and the queries that are run and just the size and, you know, usage of what you're doing there. So the year-end clear gives you the ability to easily not have to go in one show at a time, you know, pull up the year and delete one show at a time. It clears the entire year at once. So back up first. I'm pretty sure it forces a backup on you. But yes, you want to back up make sure you backed up your database or copy the database off to somewhere else if you need to really go back to those years, which, you know, that's reasonable too. And then do a year-end clear. A lot of people will keep at least 1, maybe 2 years so that they can use those shows to copy into next year, or they, you know, get the phone call from so-and-so that, you know, especially if it's only February or March, something that happened in, you know, yeah, the horses and people are still intact. It's only the show data that is cleaned up from there. But I think there's a lot of people who tend to not realize and not do that. They send me their database and they're like, why is it so slow? Or why is it so this? I'm like,
you have 12
we have like 12
years.
years of data in here, so let's try clearing some of those out.
Yeah, see, that's me. I don't ever delete
mine.
mine.
I'm scared.
Right?
If, does it allow you to pick a date, you know, like?
Yes, it's a year. You want to go ahead and click it?
No.
It's not going to do it. Calm down. See, you're going to scare Marge already. So
Okay.
And it defaults to a date 2 years ago, so that it's not defaulting to this year or last year. So it's giving you the ability. And then
floppy disk.
is that what it says? It does, doesn't it?
Super funny.
Or tape even. Oh my gosh. All right, we should totally
Might have to
change that
update that little sentence there.
That's pretty good. So clearly you can see this particular function has been around since the DOS days. So anyway, yeah, you can give it the show year, and so you can go back to 2019, 2018, 2017, just keep hitting clear, 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 and it goes out and it clears all the information. Yeah.
Resync entry count, I use that a lot. That's super helpful when you have classes that are tied together, untie them, add more things, forget that the NSBA code that you tied to your AQHA class is incorrect and have to fix that. Sometimes it just somewhere in the background that shows, you know, 3 active entries, 4 in the class. I use this function, the resync entry count, just do that, and then it kind of brings everything back together with whatever random changes you have had to make that day.
Well, we've tried to find all those pieces and spaces that it does that in the first place, but it's yeah, with the adds and scratches and, you know, more from the tablets and then the tracker and that kind of thing. Every once in a while, it still gets out of sync. Yeah.
If you ever go to a class count or something and notice the, I don't know if this one has anything. There's 9 active entries, 9 total overall. Sometimes you'll see those numbers be different. There's 9 total, 7 active, but it looks like there's 9 on your screen.
There's no
just
scratches.
Do the,
yeah.
Right. Just do the resync your entry count.
I think you can do it from that screen.
I think you can as well.
No, that's another thing we need to do. Thank you.
No.
I think the refresh, actually, I think that's what the refresh does.
I don't think that. I was going to say the refresh button does not.
Okay, then maybe that's not it.
So
maybe
I just use it through the
something
utilities, else. and you can see when you.
I will say too.
Hang on, look at the blue bar at the bottom of the screen. You can tell that it's actually resyncing and doing something. And I would recommend doing this from your server computer rather than one of the secondary or other computers, because it does take some time depending on the speed of those. It's just easier to do that from your server computer. Just, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. I will say that somewhere in the last 6 months, we did find a place where it was not syncing properly and have since fixed it. So hopefully you'll have less need for it.
Right.
But we'll see. But I guarantee nothing because there's a lot of pieces and parts here. We went over the reset result records.
Swapping judges, I don't know how many of you have issues with that, but we always seem to have, we built in Steve Meadows is coming to judge the show and then he gets sick and then we have to have Dolly Chair come in instead. So this function, you can pick the classes you want to do. You can change all of them, none of them, whatever you want to do. But this is an easy way to change from one judge to another when you have issues arise.
Just a quick question. The N, the purge old horse exhibitor information, does that clean your database? Is that what that?
So what it's supposed to do for every time a horse or a person is used, whether it's an exhibitor or a judge or an owner, it's supposed to, it tracks, I shouldn't say it's supposed to, it tracks a last used date, if you will. And then what the purges does is it looks at that last use date and it gets rid of anybody that's prior to that last use date. So if a person is in there and the last use date is 12/17 of 2017, and you're trying to purge everybody from 2019, back, then that entry, that exhibitor or person, that person would be removed. But if that one was used as a judge in your show last week, then now that last use date is last week's date, and so when you go to do that purge, that person stays in there.
Okay.
That's
so it would. I was thinking, would it get rid of doubles? Sometimes.
No, but one of the things that Ray reminded me, and we need to do, is the F6, and after we have lunch, we can go through the F6.
We'll finish the
finish
rest of the
utilities
menu
and then do
F6
F6 when we come back. And
No.
Pizza's gonna get cold, so yes, we don't want to do that. System preferences, we did compact and repair the database. It will do the take a backup of it, and then do that kind of shrinkage thing. It helps with cleanup of idiosyncrasies sometimes, because
sometimes when it comes up and says, "Do you want to compact?" Is it okay to say yes?
Yes.
We are always like no, and then I go and do it through Access.
That works too.
But
but you can say yes to that as well.
If you get a version check 0 fail, actually, then it says, "Do you want to compact or repair?" It will do it, but it won't do it well enough. That's why you go through Access to do it. So Access is what they let us distribute through Horsework for Windows. What Microsoft allows us to distribute through Horsework for Windows is a limited compact and repair, and what you can do in Access is a much deeper one. And so there's certain things that the compact and repair will clean up. And if you do it like during your backup, at the end of the day, when you close it out and it says, "Hey, I haven't been backed up," and whatever, and you say, "Yes, go ahead and do it," that does a backup, and then also tries to do the compact and repair at that point. And that's a good, nice, clean, regular. But if you get that version check 0, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you'll have to do it through Access no matter what.
Okay.
Well, let's break for lunch and then we can finish the last part of this because those new features will tie into the tablets and things.
Yep.
So